Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound Radio Show, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm your host, Robert Winfrey, and on this particular episode, should be relatively short. We're just going to preview UFC 228, which comes your way this coming Saturday, September 8th. And, of course, all the major news items that came out over the last week we will touch on. If you're listening, I kind of assume you know the format by now. If you're not and you're new, then I apologize for for any potential confusion that arises from that. But that's what's on the agenda for this evening. So, without further ado, because I don't need a long intro this week, here with me is my regular partner in crime, Jeff Harris. Jeff, how you doing this evening?
I'm well, as can be expected.
I'm glad to hear it.
The Astros are playing today. We won yesterday, and we're going to win today. Let's go Astros.
Who are you playing?
The Angels.
Seems like a safe bet on your part.
Well, we'll see.
Crazy stuff happens, but it seems like a relatively safe bet.
Like we won yesterday, but we lost the first two games against the Angels in the series.
All right. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you.
All right. Again, first up is UFC 228, and I was kind of down on this card over the last couple of weeks, and in some respects I still am, but I've tried to look at it through a slightly different lens recently, and there's a handful of fights on this card that are potentially interesting. There's a few that are just kind of designed to be stupid, crazy fun. Unfortunately, none of those are... that particular adjective does not apply to the main event. I am loosely interested in the outcome of the main event. I am not necessarily interested in the fight. But your main event is UFC welterweight champion Tyron Woodley, trying for this would be his third successful title defense, I believe. I mean, he technically kept it on the draw with Thompson. I don't know how we count that. Anyway, he's going for number 3 or number 4, depending on the numerology you want to use. Tyron gets a lot of crap because of his presentation, and his last few fights have been just awful, awful fights. But, he's only lost 3 times in his entire career. One of those was a split decision that No, I thought he lost that. The Shields fight. But he hasn't lost since 2014 when he got beat by Rory McDonald, who's still one of the best welterweights in the world. But
granted, he's had long stretches of inactivity.
He has. He was off for a really long time. Jeez, he was over a year between the Gastelum fight and his title fight.
He was scheduled to fight Johnny Hendricks, but that fight fell through. So
courtesy of Hendricks' health.
All right.
But again, he's coming on. So he gets a lot of crap, and some of it, in fairness, some of it he deserves. But he is pretty clearly one of the best welterweights in the world. You just don't think of it that way because his fights suck. And he's fighting Darren Till, who is probably not long for the division. Darren Till, undefeated. He's 5-0-1 in the UFC. The only blemish there is a majority draw with Nicholas Dalby, which was a really good fight. He only has 2 finishes in the UFC. That's crazy.
I gotta be honest, I think this is a premature booking for Darren Till.
It is in a lot of respects.
I think it's driven by his popularity as a UK star.
Oh yeah.
It's
also driven by the lack of another kind of clear-cut contender. The next best contender is...
There are contenders.
Why am I blanking on this guy's name?
Colby Covington.
Sure, I wish the timing had worked out better for Covington and Woodley.
You could. I think Rafael dos Anjos, after he beat Lawler, would have been a more suitable opponent.
Yeah, Woodley was dealing
Right,
with a
right.
shoulder injury at that time, right?
I know, but still.
I know.
And Kamaru Usman, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think the big thing holding back Usman is the definitive high-level win that's not just name value, because he just beat Damian Maia, and that's nothing to sneeze at.
Okay, what is Darren Till's one high-level win is a very
I know.
close decision
And
over.
I'm not.
All right, and Donald Cerrone. I'll give
Yeah,
him the win over Cerrone.
Yeah, that was scary, man, the way he starts Cerrone. But again, like, if any of these other people, I mean, I wish that, I wish Woodley and Dos Anjos could have fought. I really do, because I liked that fight. And if Usman had a high-profile win on of any visibility, again, I know he's coming off of the biggest win of his career, and I'm not trying to downplay that. And realistically, had that been
Okay, but
bigger,
that fight, he missed weight for that fight.
Yeah.
It was in England, and it was very close.
Yeah, again,
I feel like he should have had one more signature win, and I would have, if he had a big signature win at this weight class, having made weight, I'd be fine with him getting a title shot.
Yeah, it's just a weird circumstance, and again, I felt that this entire
normally
thing
in this weight class, winning 5 fights in a row is not going to get you a title shot.
No,
Let's be honest.
Again, I genuinely wish that they just waited to have him fight either Dos Anjos or Covington, and quite frankly, you could do either.
Look what Max Holloway had to do to get a title shot. You know,
Yep.
He didn't have to win 5 fights in a draw.
He won 7 in a row over increasingly difficult
He only
levels
has
of competition.
4 in a row. He's unbeaten in the UFC, yes, but only 4 fights in a row. This is. I'm not saying he's not ready, but this is definitely a premature title shot for him.
It's definitely driven by factors outside pure meritocracy.
And I'm not saying Darren Till doesn't deserve it, because I mean deserve is just such a relative loaded term in the sport. I'm not going to say he's not ready, because I mean who is ever really ready for a fight like this, and who are we to say such and such isn't ready? I thought Holly Holm wasn't ready for Ronda Rousey, to be honest with you. So I mean,
yeah, and
to say someone isn't ready or they are ready, I mean it's meaningless. It's meaningless.
At best, it's a baseline comparison versus similar levels of competition, but there are still a tremendous amount of unknown variables that go into it.
All right, it's meaningless next to the unknown variables.
Yeah.
I'm picking Tyron Woodley here. Flat out picking Woodley.
I'm torn a little bit, because this is one of those instances where I can see how either guy wins. It's entirely possible that
I can see. Yeah, I mean Till is so powerful. Plus he's big.
he's huge. I mean, those pictures of him next to Woodley.
Most of the guys Woodley fights are bigger than him, and Woodley has experience
not that
fighting.
much bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, because Woodley is... What is Woodley? I need a stat line here.
He's like, what, 5'10"?
He's 5'9".
All right,
and has 74-inch reach.
Right.
So he's on par with Lawler. Yeah, he and Lawler are functionally the same size.
I guess with Till isn't super tall, but he's long, I guess.
Yeah, geez, Maya's...
Let's see.
He was shorter than Maia, but he had more reach than Maia.
It says here Till is only 6 foot and 74-inch reach. So, I don't know.
Can't possibly be right.
That's what his stats say.
That's insane.
Let me see if I can find.
He's a much bigger guy than the 6 foot.
Yeah, the ESPN has him at 6'4", 74-inch reach.
All right.
So,
and
look,
again,
he's a young guy. He's a young guy. I don't know how much height you can have after you turn 25, but whatever.
No, I don't know. It might also just be that
sometimes camera angles can be misleading on size.
Also
Right.
true, and some of it's also just, it's not just the height, it's the entirety of his. You
Right.
said he had what, a 70,
It says 74 and a half.
74 and a half inches? Woodley's got some long arms. Yeah, because he's got 74 inches,
I
man.
guess my point is that Woodley is used to being the smaller guy, in just terms of overall frame. Most of his opponents are bigger than him. Yeah, Darren Till has some height on him for sure, but Woodley's used to that, and I don't think Darren Till has ever had to face the problems that Woodley presents before.
There's two primary
We've
things
never
that
seen him fight. We have never seen Till fight a real collegiate wrestler.
no, we haven't. That
Ever.
that's one of the reasons after one of the things I wanted after he beat Stephen Thompson, I think it was. It was either Thompson or the Cerrone fight. I said I wanted to see him fight Colby Covington.
Right.
Because they both ask questions of each other that neither has had to deal
Now
with
look,
yet.
Till, you can develop defensive wrestling. You can develop your wrestling game despite not having a wrestling background. We've seen plenty of fighters do it, but we've never really seen that out of Darren Till having to fight tough grinding wrestlers. He has been able, and that to me, this is a major problem. Him getting booked against Woodley is we've never seen him had to deal with that type of challenge before.
It's a pretty big question mark that Woodley should make him answer.
Look, Till is a striker. He is primarily a striker. Would you not agree?
Oh yeah, that's essentially all he's got.
This is a striker versus wrestler battle, and normally in those type of battles, Robert, I favor the wrestler.
In theory, yes. This is one of the things that gives me pause about this fight.
Okay.
Is Woodley's reticence to actually wrestle over his last 3 or 4 fights.
True.
But I mean,
but he was able to use his wrestling defensively against Damian Maia.
Yeah.
To keep the fight from going to the mat.
I mean, I sincerely doubt Darren Till's ability to get Woodley down, even if he desperately needs to. I don't think he can do that.
Do you think, based on Till's size and his experience having trained in Brazil, that will help Till avoid any type of takedown or shots from Woodley that he might want to go for?
Some of them, yes. But a lot of it depends on what Woodley tries to do in terms of how he wants his takedowns, how he sets them up. Because Woodley gives ground quite willingly. And that's worked out all right for him in his last couple of fights because his opponent, be that Stephen Thompson or Damian Maia, when he's against the fence, Thompson didn't want to get countered. Because that's all. And Woodley's striking game is either blitz you in open space and surprise you with a power shot, like he did to, Robbie Lawler's the best example. And towards the end, I think, of the second Thompson fight, he was able to catch him with one of those kind of blitz attacks. Or he backs up, puts his back on the fence, lets you swing at him a few times, tries to either duck or dodge. Yeah, I can speak. And then land a counter on you, and if you need examples of that, again, the Josh Koscheck fight is a great example. And, again, parts of both of the Wonder Boy fights, he was able to do that successfully. But it's a dangerous style for him to employ against someone whose entire game is getting you to the fence and then sniping you. As offensively minded as Darren Till is. Darren Till's not going to sit there and wait for Woodley to throw something so he can counter. He's going to be perfectly content to attack him once he gets in that position. I mean, Darren Till's best work is all done against the fence. At distance, I don't want to say he's still dangerous at distance, but it's not nearly as much of a threat. If you look at, again, all of his wins, most of the damage that he does is when he gets you against the fence. Limits your mobility, limits your defensive options, and is able to kind of bounce in and out of range, smack you with his left hand, chop at you with leg kicks as you try to circle out, grab a clinch. And it's been very effective for him, and parts of what Woodley does play into that. Now, the clinch will be an interesting area of contestation for this match because Woodley's clinch is all wrestling based, whereas Till's is all tie-based, more or less. And those circumstances almost universally favor the wrestler, assuming they're able to properly mitigate distance.
My other serious issue is Till going to be able to handle the weight? Because we have a situation here with Till where the issue is his making weight is just as big of a fight as getting into the octagon. And we saw that plague Anthony Johnson throughout his career for years. And then it became a repeated issue.
Yeah, I find Till's fight with the scale in some respects more compelling than the actual fight. I
think he just doesn't have a frame that's built for welterweight, just like Anthony Johnson, really.
He's not as... It's not quite the same because Johnson was...
gigantic.
Big? I mean, Johnson's enormous. Johnson's well over 6 feet tall.
It was clear how gigantic Johnson was when he was still at welterweight. Where it looked like he would sit next to John Jones on Inside MMA, on ye old Inside MMA, and he was
Johnson's 6'2",
and he looked like he ballooned. He looked like he ballooned next to John. He looked gigantic. It was like ridiculous.
No, it really was, and I think Till winds up at middleweight rather than all the way up at light heavyweight like Anthony Johnson did.
We see how the weight cut takes its toll on fighters and fights.
Yeah, and
it took its toll on Rafael dos Anjos.
I'm curious about Till over 5 rounds in a more action-paced fight than we got with him and Stephen Thompson.
Right.
Because if you're
granted, he was able to go considerably a tough pace with Stephen Thompson for 5 rounds, but he didn't make weight for that fight either, and he suffered greatly during that weight cut.
No, he missed weight, and if you're going to fight 5 rounds, Stephen Thompson is not the type of guy who puts a type of pace into his fights that's really going to punish your cardio. Now, that's not to say Tyron Woodley necessarily will, but he might. It's something he could try to do here just to see how Till's conditioning holds up.
One thing I think I would like to see someone push the pace against Woodley, which I think his recent opponents just haven't tried to do. Granted, Woodley does have some equalizer power, some ultimate equalizer power. He can throw. But do you think Till has the ability to push the pace and make it ugly with Woodley? Because I feel like Woodley's other opponents are just super tentative and not wanting to engage him and being very wary of him throwing like an overhand right or something.
Well, Till's not going to... That won't be a problem for Till. Darren Till is not a tentative fighter. At least he hasn't shown that tendency yet. Again, he's going to try and get... he was calculated against Stephen Thompson, but he wasn't tentative.
Right, but look, he's fighting a different type of fighter here. He's not fighting a karate-based striker. He's also fighting a heavy-handed, wrestler.
The heaviest puncher he's ever faced by a significant margin.
Right.
I still don't expect him to be tentative
unless Woodley by decision. That's my pick.
Yeah, I'm so torn on this. Let me put it like this: if Darren
Till, Woodley, I know how you feel. You hate Woodley and you want to pick Till, but Till is unreliable now to you.
You don't
want to go out on a limb because sometimes you go out on a limb and you're all depressed when you're wrong.
There's a couple of my pick here is contingent on Till making weight. If Darren Till misses weight, I think he wins the fight. If Darren Till makes weight, I don't think he does.
Okay. An interesting way to put it. Fair enough.
It's because I think if he makes weight, he's too depleted to really fight at his best against Woodley, and Woodley gets another just awful decision. If Darren Till misses weight, he retains a little bit of that hop in his step, and he wins the fight. Probably via stoppage, because I have a hard time seeing him consistently enough beating Tyron Woodley over 5 rounds, assuming Woodley remembers he can wrestle. And because I also don't really think Till's I don't know. I think Till's going to make weight for this fight, so I'm going with Tyron Woodley. And
All right.
I
All right, there you go.
my bizarre fascination with Tyron Woodley's title reign will continue because this is going to be another car crash. Like I watch his fights at this point, perpetually wondering how is he going to make it worse.
I expect an awkward fight, and I think I'm going to say it was a mistake to book this fight, just because I think the UFC, no matter what, I feel like the UFC is just booking like exciting strikers against Woodley, hoping that they will beat Woodley, and it's just not going to happen.
It could, but if you look at historically the way to beat Woodley, it's actually not really outstriking. I mean, it is outstriking him, but it's not being, a striker like Darren. I mean, there's really no reason not to just straight up try and replicate what Rory McDonald did, because that would still work based on all available evidence.
There's some sort of hullabaloo about the UFC has been rumored to be paying Kamaru Usman as a backup for this fight. Is that true?
I have no idea whether it's true or not. I know Tyron Woodley said he would not accept a last-minute fight with Usman.
Okay. I think
he was on.
I think this was reported by MMA Fighting. He was on the MMA. Usman told Luke Thomas that he would have been on weight for September 8th, whether the UFC officially reached out to him or not.
Smart of him to put himself in that position. I think Helwani asked Tyron Woodley about this, and Woodley said he would not accept a short notice fight with Usman.
Okay, here's what Usman said himself. I was in training and the UFC was like, hey, we want you on standby. I was going to do that anyway. They didn't have to tell me. I was going to be there on weight whether they compensated me to be there or not. I was going to do that for free because that was my shot. Now, Woodley is saying he never heard anything about that and he would not face anyone else except Darren Till at UFC 228. So
he also said he doesn't care if Till makes weight or not. If Till misses, he's still going to fight him.
Right. So I don't know why. Now look, Kamaru Usman could be lying here. It's very possible. Usman could be lying, and he could just be trying to raise his stock in the public eye and trying to make some noise and trying to create some buzz for himself. That is very possible. He could be lying through his teeth here. But if the UFC really did, in some sort of contractual capacity, ask him to be on standby, and they didn't notify Tyron Woodley, huge oversight. Huge, Robert. Huge.
Oh, massive. And in fairness to Woodley, he's not saying he will never fight Usman. He's saying he wouldn't fight Usman on short notice under these circumstances. And
look,
I don't blame Woodley for that at all.
Things Woodley says get on my nerves sometime, but if there is any truth, and it's a huge if, I can't really blame him.
I mean, I couldn't blame him anyway because Usman and Darren Till could not be more different. I mean, Till's a tall, rangy, striking-based fighter with a really odd hybrid of karate and Muay Thai, who bounces a bit, who snipes at distance, who has some pretty gnarly leg kicks. And then you have Usman, who is a wrestler. An offensive wrestler. I mean,
right.
Almost everything you do for Darren Till to prepare for him in terms of tape study, in terms of game planning, in terms of strategy, goes out the window.
But what happens if Woodley? I mean, what happens if Woodley gets hurt? I mean, we've seen these situations many times before. It's a crazy sport.
Then we would get our second interim title. This one between Till and Usman. I mean, I imagine Darren Till would fight Usman on short notice, but he also might not. I mean, he also might say, no, I signed for a title fight.
You can make an interim title fight, and then Darren Till will miss weight, and then he won't be eligible for the title, as we've seen before.
Yeah, this whole fight That whole main event can go sideways in such a hurry.
My problem is that Woodley's example of of a basketball team, because if your star basketball player gets hurt, you can still have the playoff game or the championship game, right?
In theory,
because it's a team sport, and you have backups. You have backups built into that team. You have second and third stringers, and you have bench warmers and backup players on any team sport.
Assuming the team is properly managed, yes.
Right. MMA, it's not the same.
Not even close.
Now, look, I'm quite frankly, if the UFC wanted to figure out a way to have official backups, I'd be fine with that. And I'm fine with that because of the way fighters frequently get injured and hurt, and they frequently have been doing it at the last minute or missing weight or what have you. But to me, you have to get the fighters to, and if the fighters are willing to agree to that, I'm fine with it. But I also want training camps regulated as well. So screw me, because I'm the one who actually says stuff like that. And people get angry when I say that, but I'm still going to say it.
Now, I don't hate the idea of official backups. Again, I think you hit the nail on the head in that all parties have to agree to it.
Right. So that's my problem with this. If this Usman thing is true, and they're not telling Woodley and getting Woodley to agree with it, it's pointless. Now maybe
good.
I mean now maybe they're thinking maybe Woodley gets hurt and they still want Usman as a backup. I mean, but that's better for Till, because Usman is in many ways a similar fighter to Woodley, right?
Similar and not as good yet.
Right.
Big caveat there, yet.
Right. So,
I mean, again, for Till it makes a lot of sense because you're getting still, again, Usman's not exactly the same, but there's enough similarities in terms of skill set, in terms of their strategy, in terms of...
If this fight has a knockout, I'll be surprised. I expect a very awkward main event here.
Nah, we'll get a knockout in this one. It just won't happen. It'll be a terrible, terrible fight until like 4:59 of the 5th. Then somebody slips on a banana peel.
Very nice, Robert.
Hey, I'm the one who has to watch all of it.
I'm going to watch all of it too.
I'm just saying, you don't have to. If the fight starts sucking, you can get up and walk away.
All right. So let's move on to the real money fight, the co-main event. We have for the women's flyweight championship. We have Nico Montano versus Valentina Shevchenko. This fight is just 1 year removed from Shevchenko losing at bantamweight to Amanda Nunes for the bantamweight title. So now she gets her shot at redemption against Nico Montano. Is this fight nothing but a formality to give the belt to Valentina, Robert?
I'm trying to think of it as not a formality, but I'm struggling. I don't have anything against Nico Montano, but if you look at her game planning and her skill set, she generally gets by finding a single area of the fight, or two areas if you can transition them together, where she's better than her opponent, and then being not significantly worse than them in the other areas, and then trying to force the fight where she's better. Again, if you look at the Modafferi fight, she does a lot of proximity striking, I think is kind of how I tend to think of it, because way on the outside, she and Roxanne are kind of even. Roxanne's probably got a slight edge because she was the better kicker.
Do we want to give her credit for her wins on The Ultimate Fighter and beating people like Honchak and Murphy?
I mean, they're not nothing.
More experienced than her, more fights than her.
Well, and again, part of the same strategy generally applies. I mean, if you look at to me, her most impressive win on that show was the Honchak win, because I thought Barb was going to take the whole thing. I mean, it turns out that the couple of years or so Honchak's been on the shelf caught up to her. And my real struggle in this instance is I don't know at any level of the game where she is significantly better than Valentina.
Valentina's not unbeatable, though.
No, and
she's lost 3 times.
Yeah, 2 of
Nico
those.
Montano on the conference call that we had on the site last week, she got on my nerves a lot during that call. But she made 2 good points. Valentina Shevchenko is human, and she's not unbeatable. She has lost. I mean, we saw the MMA media frequently had delusions about Fedor. Frequently. And Fedor eventually lost, and people lost it. Valentina has already lost 3 times in her career. Granted, 2 of those times were in the UFC to Amanda Nunes. At the same time, I think Valentina Shevchenko tends to overperform in some fights, like I think she did in the first fight against Nunes, where I think a lot of people expected Nunes to just steamroll her, right?
Yeah, that was the general thought.
And in the rematch, it was a very, very close fight. I didn't score it for Shevchenko, but some people did. I think she
for the
definitely.
Record, I'm one of those. For those of you who don't know,
I
did.
And I think you would agree she definitely overperformed against Holly Holm, a much bigger, like just from a physical standpoint, arguably a bigger, stronger woman and a more accomplished boxer.
Yeah, that was a big. I mean,
and
for me personally, that was
Holm adapted her style very well to kickboxing and striking as well. So,
yeah, it's again part of the. I don't think Valentina's a perfect fighter. I think a lot of people.
No, but she's well-rounded, despite being more of a striker and kickboxer. She's proven she's well-rounded. So that's why I favor her, and I'm picking her to win. But Shevchenko, I guess to her benefit, even though she's the champion, no one's expecting her to win. So she has that, in a way, she has that going for her. And there's less for Valentina that she can study here. She can't. It's tougher to build.
There is less tape on
Montano
to look at. I'm worried about Montano's stance in this fight. She stands very square to her opponent.
Right.
She doesn't have a lot of good defense, and I can
I can't really pick her in good conscience for any reason.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe
she can turn this into a pure clinch fight, and maybe she has an edge there. But
look, sometimes fighters just get better right before our eyes. I think Rose Namajunas was a lot like that.
Yeah, and
a similar level of experience, and just kind of had to grow and learn in the UFC, basically, off the Ultimate Fighter show.
I think Montano is going to be a significant player in the division for quite a while.
See.
I just don't think she's in a position right now to really beat Valentina.
But look, after Thug Rose lost the title off the Ultimate Fighter, did you expect her to become champion as soon as she did, and knocking out Joanna?
No, I didn't.
Especially after she got. Look at how she got handled by Carla Esparza.
Yeah,
it was not. That was not much of a challenge.
No, she was utterly unprepared for Carla's wrestling.
Yeah, like she was dominated by Esparza, right?
Top to bottom.
Right. I did not. And granted, she went on a great streak after that fight, and she definitely got better. But I never expected that young woman who got utterly annihilated and just dominated from start to finish, and then submitted by Carla Esparza, to be the first person to knock out Joanna Champion and win the title from her. After Joanna was having that just insane run with the belt. So I guess my point is that sometimes fighters can grow and develop despite their lack of experience, and just by learning in the UFC. Some fighters can sink or swim in the UFC. I think Thug Rose is definitely one of those. BJ Penn, who was a phenom, definitely one of those. I think you would agree.
Yeah, if you want another one, there's a few others who have had...
Frank Mir, arguably.
Frank Mir? Oh, Frank Mir, definitely. I don't think he ever... He had, what, like 2 fights in his entire career outside the UFC?
Hmm?
Matt Riddle actually had his entire professional career inside the UFC. It's certainly possible, and again, I think there's a lot of upside to Montano.
I'm still picking Valentina.
And further fairness to Montano, if this was her against, Sijara Eubanks, I would pick Montano in a heartbeat.
If it was Angela Hill, I'd pick Montano.
If it was... Who's the next contender down after Valentina in that division? Because it's a weird division.
See.
Yeah, it's Eubanks, it's Caitlin Chookagian.
Chookagian looks like a decent prospect.
Yeah, and
honestly, if it was Alexa Davis, I still might pick Montano.
I would favor Montano over Alexis Davis. I would.
Not that I hate Alexis Davis or anything, but she's a little inconsistent, isn't she?
Well, she's inconsistent, and her entire game revolves around being able to drown you in jiu-jitsu. And if she can't force that, she struggles.
And to me, Alexis is a bit of I don't want to say choke artist, but it seems whenever she fights a bigger, tougher opponent, she always loses.
I would, again, so to make the point, I'm not trying to throw Montano under the bus here. There's a lot of I would favor over a lot of that division.
I mean, look, she lost to Caitlin Chookagian. Let's see, yeah. But
I can't pick. I also don't think I'd pick anyone else in that division right now over Valentina.
Chookagian, I think she could be fighting for the title next. Quite frankly,
she might. She
could be fighting the winner.
She might. Again, it's a weird division right now in the sense that a lot of people are still trying to find their footing in it.
And who's gonna make the cut? Like a bigger name could be just cutting down to 125 and might just get the title shot that way. That wouldn't be.
I mean, there's a few. There's
a
few 115-pounders who could move up.
Right, exactly. Yuana might finally decide to move up and just go for the.
Quite frankly, I wouldn't. I know she'd still be smaller, but Jessica Andrade could move up to 125 from 115.
And I would not. I would pay top dollar for Valentina versus Joanna in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
that could be one of the greatest. That could be one of the greatest women's title fights ever.
I mean, I think Valentina takes it pretty handily, but it would be a great fight.
Yeah, unquestionably. But
yeah, I like Valentina here. I like her everywhere. I mean, again, striking at distance, it's not really a contest.
She's developed her submission game.
Yeah, her overall grappling game is surprising. If you just looked at her resume, you wouldn't think it's as good as it is. But, I mean, she's got sneaky takedowns from the clinch. Her trips are good.
Let me look at the stats here.
She's not bad off of her
Nico
back.
is 5'5". She's 5'5". What's her reach? She's fighting Valentina. Valentina is also 5'5", 67-inch reach. Don't know what Nico's stats are.
Let me see.
Well, I know her height, but I don't know what her reach, if she has a reach advantage at all.
Well, they have not. She's the champion. How do you not have that stat listed on the website?
Have
UFC?
they? Yeah. Have they not logged her?
Come on, man. That's just weak.
She's just so young in her career. They haven't logged her reach.
We're waiting for her arms to finish growing. That's just stupid. I think Shevchenko just keeps walking Montano onto straight lefts and probably finishes her via attrition sometime in the fourth.
Like I think Nico's grumpy attitude kind of bothers me.
Yeah, I have not seen any of her interviews. I haven't interacted with her at all.
Well,
I have
I
no
interact
basis for
with
comparison.
her, and I'm like, in what areas do you think Valentina excels at? And she's like, fighting. I'm like, good for you, Nico. I didn't say that, but
she's only made a career out of it for the last 10+ years of her life.
I'm thinking, yeah, wow, that's such a.
I mean, in fairness, with Valentina, you could also say dancing or competitive shooting.
I mean, and then she would just give like single word answers to everything. She was like, she has a big chip on her shoulder, and that really rubs me the wrong way. I'm like, if you're the champion, right? You know, and yeah, people are expecting you to lose. I'd be like, ride the wave as hard as you can. But whatever, you do you. So does that add to my wanting to see Valentina win this belt even more? Yes, it does, Robert.
Who you root for is who you root for, man, for whatever reason.
Yeah, I'm at least I'm honest about who I'm rooting for here. I'm rooting for Valentina. Oh, I also asked Valentina if she plans on making the nose rose, and she found that very funny.
I can't pick against Shevchenko against anyone in that division, and I'll be wrong. One of those times I'll be wrong, but at the moment I can't do it.
You know what impresses me about Valentina? Her intelligence is like off the charts.
She's one of the most God, it's gonna sound like I'm like verbally filleting her, but she's an unbelievably talented person.
I mean, her fight IQ just sounds insane.
I mean, yeah, if you look at the success she's had in Muay Thai, the success she's had in MMA, she's trilingual. I mean,
even though like English is not her first language, like she'll go on
her legitimate third.
Right,
she's fluent in both Russian and Spanish.
But even though it's clearly not her first language, like she'll go on like a 20-minute answer, basically. Like she'll really try to elaborate and go into detail in English as best she can. When other English as a second language, like you'll never, they'll be like, oh, it's normal, like Anderson Silva, it's normal, like that. Valentina will like basically, it's like a professor giving like a lecture almost.
Yeah, I got her to win, I got her to finish, but.
And it's another reason I feel very blessed we have her in this sport, because she seems insanely intelligent.
She could do the number of things Valentina could be doing with her time and energy is.
I feel very blessed. She could do
a lot of other things.
I mean, she just seems like such a unique, intelligent person, and I'm not saying I have like a crush on her. I just think she's. I think she's just a really great, intelligent athlete, and I'm glad we have her.
And the ability to articulate that as well. I mean, there's a lot. Exactly. I mean, if you listen to people who can understand Mike Tyson, he's a boxing encyclopedia, but he doesn't necessarily articulate it all that well. Right. And Valentina, again, she's more than willing to talk.
Considering English is her third language and the way she manages to articulate things, it's pretty impressive.
I have a tremendous amount of respect for anyone who speaks multiple languages. I can barely speak this one.
Exactly. I totally agree.
All right, next up.
So at featherweight we have Zabit.
Magomed Sharipov gets a can.
Right. This was supposed to be technically it was already a gimme fight beforehand.
It was a fight he was highly favored to win. Again, I would pick him over Yair Rodriguez in a heartbeat.
Right.
But Yair at least has some decent UFC performances.
And Yair is very fast. He has a lot of speed, and that can be important, because speed kills.
And he knocked out Andre Fili, which isn't much, but it's something.
Well, Yair has he has that like unique style, and that can be difficult. Sometimes that can be difficult, but he can throw like 100 strikes a minute from multiple angles, and that can be unless you have a way to contain that, like a Frankie Edgar, that can be dangerous. It can be dangerous.
Yeah.
So,
and instead, now Zabit fights Brandon Davis,
who's 1-2.
Whose lone win in the UFC is over another Dana White, another contender guy in Steven Peterson, who has a terrible, terrible chest tattoo.
Okay, so that's why Brandon is in this, because he was on the Contender Series.
Yeah, he won his fight on the Contender Series over another guy who made his way to the UFC despite losing, Austin Arnett, who has terrible, terrible fights. I was gonna pick Zabit over Yair.
Do you think Zabit is a legitimate prospect for featherweight?
Yes, but he needs to move from prospect to contender, and that's a hard thing to do.
Okay. Well, I mean, then you need to do that, you need to just annihilate guys like Brandon Davis.
No, and he does. He needs to run over. He needs to just beat this guy like he owes him money. I mean, Zabit's last fight, the Botniak win, was weird in the sense that it was impressive and simultaneously
he got
exposing some of his issues.
But he got fight in the knife for that, so he's
only received bonuses in the UFC.
And he only has one career loss so far, very early in his career.
Yeah, 5 years ago, give or take. A little over 5 years ago.
Not ready to declare this guy the next Khabib or anything, but he's got a lot of positives going for him.
Yeah. I think it was Jack Slack who mentioned this about Zabit, and I tend to agree with this point. He reminds me of John Jones up till the Shogun fight, when John was just kind of a bit of a wild man. Not a crazy wild man, but he did a lot of stuff because he didn't know what else to do there. And in fairness, some of it kept working, and some of it he appropriately discarded. Zabit is in that same position where he doesn't just spin because he likes the sensation of turning 360 degrees and throwing a kick, unlike, say, Yair Rodriguez, who spins because he genuinely has no idea what else to do with himself. Zabit tries to set them up. He's a more well-rounded fighter, but there's a few things he really has to button up. He always circles the same way. He's very... I think it's... I can't remember which hand it is. But there's only one... all of his punching offense tends to come from the same side. Forgive me for not remembering which side that is, but it's one of them. He's very heavy on that one side. I actually think Zabit's better on the ground than he is on the feet. His top control and his top pressure is pretty shocking for a guy who looks like he does to be as heavy on top as he is, to transition the way he does, because he has very slick transitions. But he needs to start, again, buttoning up the little things, because you can get by beating the Brandon Davises of the world just like you are. But if you want to compete against the upper echelon, there's things you need to fix. And I hope he's able to, because there's a lot of what he does that I enjoy, but those are things he does need to address. And I don't give Brandon Davis much of a chance here, outside of a lucky punch. I think Zabit pressures him. I think he gets in close. I think he takes him down and just kind of smashes him from there. And we'll still have to wait for Zabit to fight a legitimate top featherweight in the world. He and Yair are both ranked, which I think is... I don't think Yair should be, and I think it's speculative to have Zabit as number 15 in the world. But if Zabit gets by
it's a little premature, I would agree.
If Zabit wins here, I would like to see him against, Darren Elkins or Ricardo Lamas.
I like both of those fights.
I mean, he hasn't really fought a strong wrestler yet. I mean, he hasn't fought much in the UFC at all. But if we're going to start pushing this guy and hyping him the way that people are, those would be the next steps. And those are the types of fighters that, if he can beat, signifies that he is moving in the correct direction rather than simply smashing overmatched competition.
Honestly, I would not even put this fight on the main card.
I wouldn't either.
I'd put Rivera versus Dodson instead.
Oh yeah,
quite frankly.
I would put Rivera and Dodson on the main card over this fight and the next two. All of the
Andrade Carolina?
Yeah.
No way.
I mean, you can still
No
have
way.
Andrade and
No
Carolina on
way.
the main card.
So this fight's a potential title eliminator.
I mean, you can still have them on the main card, but I mean,
Price Al Hassan, yes.
I mean, Price Al Hassan is there just to be a crazy brawl. That's all it's there.
Kovalevich versus Andrade, no way. The winner of this fight could be fighting for the strawweight title, quite frankly. I think the winner. I think the winner is going to.
This should be. These are the two people who are at the top of that division. Carolina's the last person to beat Rose. Jessica Andrade's only loss at strawweight is to Joanna, and she was a very competitive bantamweight before that.
I like Andrade here.
Oh yeah.
I'm picking Andrade, and I like Carolina a lot. I just think both these women are good strikers, kickboxers. Carolina, I think, probably has a slight edge in the kickboxing department. I just think Andrade, with her Brazilian jiu-jitsu, her grappling game, will be able to do more in this fight.
I mean, for me, this comes down to a lot of Carolina's game breaks down in a couple of ways. She's at distance, she's a less successful Joanna, but she has a better clinch game than Joanna does, at least offensively. That's really the best part of Carolina's game, is her knees in the clinch. And
she got submitted by Gadelia. I just kind of see this fight going a lot like the Gadelia fight.
I mean,
honestly.
This is going to look like I agree. I mean, Jessica doesn't have the same kind of ring craft and cage mobility that Gadelia does. Gadelia is much better about actually cutting off the cage, whereas Andrade is content to follow you.
I think this is a good fight on paper, so I just hope it turns out to be a good fight.
Yeah, I mean, Andrade is going to press the distance. She's going to close distance. She's going to beat up Carolina to the body and head. She's going to take her down and probably just... I mean, she out-grappled and out-maneuvered people from top position who are significantly better grapplers than Carolina is. Andrade, I like Andrade to get the finish, and quite frankly, I kind of like Andrade to beat Rose. I'm not completely sold on that, but I wouldn't sleep on her chances.
I don't think it's a bold prediction, to be honest with you. I think Andrade matches up with Rose better than Jan Jacek.
Significantly. Jessica's
then
got
again,
a
honestly,
stouter chin
look, Rose is great, but I mean, there are a lot of matchups I think are tougher matchups for her at strawweight, even though she beat Joanna, just because styles make fights, right?
Yeah, and Jessica's style, at least on paper, matches up much better with how Rose has been fighting lately.
It's kind of like, to me, how Holly Holm's style matched up better against Ronda's than it did against most of the division.
Yeah. And again, kicking off the main card, we have Abdul Razak Al Hassan and Nico Price. This is here to just be
action.
It's just here to be action. I mean, you have Al Hassan.
Then they better deliver.
I mean, in fairness to Al Hassan, he is 3-1 in the UFC, and his only loss is a split decision to Omari Akhmedov.
He has 2 wins over Sabah Hamasi in the UFC.
Yeah, the reason they did that immediate rematch was there was some controversy around the stoppage in the first fight. Not in the second. Right. The second was very clearly Al-Assad cleaning his clock.
I like Price. I kind of
like Price here too. I mean, if
he's
he
not
can,
a leader to me, but
if he can get through that first round kind of explosive offense that Al Hassan brings, I like him as the fight keeps going. I mean, Price is a guy who tends to drop first rounds unless he finishes you, and then come back in the second.
I'm leaning toward Price here.
Yeah, I like Price, all things considered.
Hopefully, I hope the fight's good, though, because I don't think it should be on the main card, but hopefully it'll be.
Again, it's here to just be a crazy fight, and in fairness to both guys, they have a documented history of that.
I just really feel like Rivera Dotson should be on the main card.
Yeah. I mean, at a minimum, it should be main eventing the prelims.
I'm very surprised.
But yeah,
Look,
As for the
Rivera had one loss to Marlon Moraes, who's a freaking stud.
Yeah, I mean, his one loss since his second ever professional fight.
All right, so I think we should.
Yeah, but
do
on the main card,
quick
on
hits
the
from here.
prelims, we have Carla Esparza versus Tatiana Suarez, which was
There's
supposed
some
to.
good fighters on the prelims, honestly.
There's a few decent fights here. Again, if you kind of put aside the malaise of the UFC and the fact that Tyron Woodley's title reign has been as interesting as watching paint dry, there's a few decent fights here kind of hiding out.
I agree.
I'm not that interested in Esparza and Suarez just because I believe Suarez is going to out-wrestle Esparza. But, Suarez is 6-0.
How can they have 5 fights on Fight Pass? That's just cruel.
There's a couple there that are all right.
Yeah, but I mean 5?
The
So
prelims have to be
9,
on FX.
14 fights?
Yep.
Like, are they expecting, like, 2 fight... Like, I don't know, maybe Diego Sanchez just isn't going to get cleared this week, so that fight's just off.
Who knows? I mean, again, who knows?
They really overbooked this card bad. This card is...
As someone who is going to be stuck in a chair from the first prelim until the main event concludes, I agree, and...
Like, why is Charles Byrd Darren Stewart on this card? Like, take that off.
I could not tell you.
Like, take that off and then put Jim Miller versus Alex White on FX, quite frankly.
Yeah, I'd be perfectly okay with that. I really have no idea why there are this many fights on the card. They must be planning for something to fall off.
Who is Charles Byrd?
Oh, I should know.
Another contender series.
I know he was on the Contender Series. I think he won his fight there, too.
He did. He won 2 fights on the Contender Series, so they're trying to push some. They're definitely trying to push some contender guys here. Diego Sanchez is fighting Oy vey.
I mean, Bird's only 9-4.
Okay, so wait, Sanchez was supposed to be fighting Neil Magny, so.
Oh, gee, that fight should not be sanctioned. That should not be okay. Anyway, so sorry for the rest of the card. Again, we have Esparza and Suarez. Okay. We have Aljamain Sterling and Cody Stamann, which is Stamann or Stamann?
Very good fight.
Yeah, I tend to think it's a bit too much of a step up for Stamann in terms of what we've seen him face. I mean, his last 2 wins...
Sterling's very hit and miss, though.
He is.
And he's very awkward as well. He reminds me of Phil... To me, he's like a bantamweight Phil Davis.
That's not an unfair comparison. I mean, the big thing about Stamann is his last 2 fights were split decisions.
Mm-hmm.
In fairness, I do believe he won both of them. So
I don't think Sterling, I don't mind saying he has bad transitions. He doesn't transition.
He does. His striking has been coming along a little bit, but his whole game is grappling based.
Yeah.
And in fairness, this is the type of fight that he should be able to win if he's as good as he has shown to be in the past. So I like Sterling there. Again, Rivera and Dodson is a great fight. I like Rivera here, actually. I think there's a bit of a book at this point on how to beat John Dodson. And while his only losses since returning to bantamweight are split decisions to John Lineker and Marlon Moraes, and in fairness, I thought he won.
Dodson's getting very hit and miss lately. Look at his record.
Yeah, again, since moving... Again, I thought he won the Lineker fight, in fairness to him.
Right.
But...
It wasn't a great performance, though.
No.
He used to be just very quick and explosive, and I feel like he's lost some of that. I don't know.
He hasn't adapted his style to deal with the lack of that same type of explosion. I mean, the dude still hits hard, but he doesn't. I feel like a lot of the same thing.
I feel like he's done more. Like he did more in that first fight with Johnson than he's done in his last 5 fights, basically.
That's probably about true. I mean, the big thing for me with Dodson is, recently at least, he always exits to the same side on combinations. He's very repetitive. And Jimmy Rivera is the type of fighter who can get a read on that and then punish you for it. So I like Rivera there. Again, Bird and Stewart. I mean, I don't like Darren Stewart at all. He just barely got his first win in the UFC.
Charles Bird, holdover from Contender Series. Yeah.
I'll go with Stewart there, but that's a coin flip. Then on Fight Pass, for some reason, Diego Sanchez is fighting. This baffles me. He's fighting Craig White, who has been in the UFC. Lost to Neil Magny.
To Neil Magny.
He stepped in on short notice for that fight, I seem to recall. Magny was supposed to fight somebody else.
Is he not stepping in on short notice here?
I don't think so. I think this was...
Okay, never mind.
I mean, again, White stepped in to fight Neil Magny on short notice at Fight Night 130, I'm pretty sure. Because otherwise
and
that
he's
fight
not
makes
related
no
to
sense.
Alex White on the prelims either.
No, Craig White is British. British? Welsh?
And Alex White is American. We have two Whites fighting back to back.
I like Craig White. I can't pick Diego Sanchez over anyone at this point. I mean,
I
come
wouldn't
on.
put Diego Sanchez against like a blind orangutan.
I would pick Diego Sanchez to beat CM Punk. That's about it.
If it was a kangaroo, if it was a kangaroo, I would pick the kangaroo.
Yeah. If it's an animal that has any inkling of how to fight, the animal's beating him. Jim Miller and Alex White, this makes me sad because I like Jim Miller so much.
Winnable fight for him.
I mean, if he can't win this, he needs to be done. I mean, look, he's on a 4-fight losing streak. Now, in fairness, he's not losing to anybody. He lost to Dustin Poirier, and that was only a majority decision. I thought he came on very strong in that last round. Anthony Pettis, Francisco Trinaldo, and he got knocked out by Dan Hooker. I mean, this isn't the lower end of the division that he's been fighting. Now
Right.
he is fighting the lower end of the division, and if he can't beat Alex White, he really needs to reconsider his career at this point.
Right.
And
I agree.
I'm a fan of Jim Miller's. I have been for a long time, but... And so, again, I will sentimentally pick him to win. I think he's still got enough to beat the Alex Whites of the world, but I can't... he's much, much closer to the end of his career than the beginning. Irene Aldana fights Lucy Pudilova, and this is kind of a take-it-or-leave-it fight. I mean, Pudilova lost to Lena Landsberg. I thought she won that fight. Won the other two. Whereas Aldana's kind of sputtered in the UFC. I'll go with Aldana, but I'm not sold on that. Oh, Jared Brooks is back, fresh off of knocking himself unconscious when he knocked himself out fighting Jose Torres. The funniest thing about that whole scenario was after the fact when he and Torres were trash-talking each other on Twitter. He says, I win that fight 9 times. This is the only way I could possibly lose that fight, and I still win that fight 9 times out of 10. To which someone accurately pointed out, if this is the only way you can lose that fight, that means in any given fight you give yourself a 10% chance of knocking yourself out. He's fighting Roberto Sanchez, who is 8-1. He's had a couple of fights in the UFC. I think he's 1-1. Yeah, 1-1. He lost to Joseph Morales, beat Joby Sanchez. I like Brooks here. I kind of like Brooks overall. And then kicking everything off, Jeff Neal fights Frank Camacho. Neal's one of those Contender Series guys, right? No? LFA. Yeah, Contender Series. Beat Brian Camozzi. That means very little. And Frank Camacho is punch drunk. I kind of like Camacho there. I'll probably be made to look stupid by that, but I kind of like Camacho. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to regret that. That's the one I'm going to regret. That's my one pick from this I'm going to regret, is picking Frank Camacho to win a fight. All right, so what else are you looking forward to on that card, Jeff? Again, there's a few decent fights hiding out there.
Wow. I mean, Aljamain Sterling versus Cody Stamann. I mean, might not be fireworks, but that's a legit fight. Rivera versus Dodson, a very legit fight. Esparza versus Suarez, a very, very interesting fight. So, I mean, the first three I just mentioned, Robert, any of those three fights could easily be on the main card.
And the main card of any pay-per-view.
And I would have no problem with it. UFC prelims, we have Jim Miller. He was kind of over the hill, and a bunch of over the hill fighters or cab drivers, basically.
Yeah, it's again, apart from Jared Brooks, who you have to like flyweight fights to like Jared Brooks' style of fighting, because it's high energy.
But you definitely don't need 5 fights on the Fight Pass at all. That's insanity.
No, this is a very overbooked card, and they're basically praying at this point that at least one of these fights falls through, so that they don't have to have the same amount of runtime.
Only reason I feel like it kind of makes sense if you have a situation of just like a bunch of fights falling off on like weigh-ins. So I don't know I don't know if Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard are expecting something to happen. But yeah, having this many this is 14 fights. Has there ever been a UFC card with this many fights?
Yes.
14 overall?
Yes.
Like, when on like Fight Week or what?
I don't remember the numbers or the specific events, but
to me, having 3 fights on Fight Pass is excessive.
Yeah, some of that depends on how many you can actually fit on the prelims.
This is basically to me, FX and Fight Pass here. That's like a full fight card right there.
In a perfect world, yes.
And then we have the pay-per-view. So now maybe it's because I don't know. It seems it's a lot. It's too much.
It is. It really is. But
because I got to be honest with you, some of the recent fight cards have been a little light in terms of matchmaking. You could have spread a couple of these fights around and had some stronger fight cards overall.
Yeah.
So it's a bit weird to me to book all these fights on. I mean, don't get me wrong. The FX prelims, that's a great set of prelims.
Yeah.
To be frank, and I'm fine with that. But I question the logic of having 5 fights on Fight Pass.
As do I. Again, I can't remember. There have been some 13, 14 fight cards. I don't remember which ones, but they have happened in the past.
I remember when they were getting up to 12 with UFC Facebook. I thought that was a lot. Man,
it is. It's the average at this point, but it is a lot. It's why there's 6. It's why these broadcasts last 6 hours plus.
When we started getting the prelims broadcast on TV, I thought, okay, this is cool. So we can get a few extra fights. Basically, we don't just get the pay-per-view. We get the pay-per-view and we get a few extra fights. And then they started doing the streaming prelims, and I'm like, man. Honestly, I would.
Fans of the UFC exist in an abusive relationship.
I gotta be honest. I would highly consider just cutting streaming fights entirely.
I think at this point they exist because they have Fight Pass, and if you have Fight Pass, you have to do something with it.
I agree, but I feel like there's to me, it's just a lot. I feel like it kills the momentum of shows to have this many fights on one card.
It isn't good for it.
Because there's a lot of hurry up and wait aspects of a pay-per-view card, and I think this just overextends it.
Oh, there are. Yeah,
I mean, it's not my promotion. Not my promotion.
The fight. I mean, the event 2 weeks ago had a full 30-minute break between James Krause beating Warley Alves and the start of the first fight on the main card.
Right.
Legitimate 30 minutes. It's again.
I don't know. Maybe
it is designed to punish you.
Swing fight. Maybe you need a swing fight to fill time or something. Like a dark fight.
At this point, I don't like the idea of post limbs. I really don't. But I don't think that's what we're doing here. I mean, we're going to send Diego Sanchez and Craig White out after the main event just to send the crowd home happy.
I'm just spitballing here.
I don't know. I mean,
I feel like
I wish
if
I had
you
a
have
better
to have
idea.
a streaming card, I feel like 3 is enough.
Yeah.
3 is more than enough.
With a minor consideration being made to having all of your prelims streaming, depending on terrestrial broadcast restrictions, but yeah. I mean, if everything gets preempted, then sure, stream it all. But
that's all I really
absent
have
that-
to say about the that's all I have to say on the prelims.
Speaking of these prelims and how long they're going to take, I will have coverage of this event from the first prelim. So good old Jeff Neal and Frank Camacho. Up until
Congrats.
the
You're going
main
to have
event.
excellent. Your fight is going to have excellent play-by-play coverage by the one and only Robert Winfrey. You're lucky.
Ugh. I'll try not to gouge my own eyes out halfway through this event. They're just so long. They're so long. But stop by, say hello. Feel free to correct anything I get wrong in coverage. I'm happy to fix, mistakes that I make, and Lord knows I make plenty of them.
Okay.
All right. So again, I'll have that this coming Saturday. What do we got for news? Was there any major news that we wanted to break down?
Some minor fight matchups. Tanya Evinger versus Aspen Ladd at UFC 229. Ilio Latifi versus Corey Anderson, UFC 232.
That's so bad.
UFC Sao Paulo, Chase Sherman versus Augusto Sakai, the Sao Paulo Brazil card.
Okay, crappy heavyweights, yay.
It looks like that Chuck Liddell Tito Ortiz rematch. That's like
they were medically sanctioned.
8 years in the making is going to be happening. The promoter will be the Oscar De La Hoya Golden Boy Promotions. And the California State Athletic Commission will sanction and approve of the fight. Despite Liddell being 48, Ortiz is 43, Liddell had his fair share of knockouts toward the end of his career.
At least Ortiz has been competing actively recently, for whatever it's worth. I mean,
should he have been, though? Should he have been allowed to compete?
He won a fair number of them.
Not so sure. I mean, that doesn't necessarily excuse it. That's not, to me, that even him having won some of those fights, to me, is not a good enough excuse.
I mean, he's won them, and he's also not been fighting knockout artists. And
let's see, when is this fight even happening?
I don't think we have a specific date yet.
But the plan is that Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy will promote a Tito Ortiz Chuck Liddell 3 fight.
I'm gonna have to cover that shit. For some reason, that reality just hit me. When that happens, I'm going to have to cover it.
I wish Chuck didn't have to do this. Chuck basically,
you saw him hitting pads, right?
Like, I mean, I love Chuck Liddell. I mean, the guy's a legend, but he basically had to he basically had to be forced into retirement.
Because he was, I mean, you can watch his last couple of fights. You can see the brain damage.
The chin was gone. The chin was gone, and he did not want to retire. But
it's at this point I'm legitimately thinking that Tito Ortiz knocks out Chuck Liddell when they fight. That's my actual thought process.
Basically, the only way Tito would have been able to beat Chuck was due to both guys getting older.
Yeah, who ages worse? And it turns out it was Chuck.
Yeah, Chuck is still 5 years older than Tito, though. He's 5 years his senior, so I mean, he's already, he's already ahead of him there. So it really bothers.
I mean, Chuck's fighting style, inviting himself to get hit to land counters, it doesn't age. It's a mess. It's gonna be a mess, and for some reason, I'm probably gonna have to cover it.
So this isn't a fight matchup, but we already talked about Donald Cerrone versus Mike Perry. Apparently, this matchup has caused somewhat of a falling out between Cerrone and Jackson Winklejohn MMA because they also train Mike Perry. So apparently, Cerrone has left the team as a result of that. I don't know if it's a permanent thing, but it seems like there's some bad. I don't know how if the media is blowing this out of proportion, but it seems like there's some bad blood here over this thing.
Well,
Robert.
Cerrone was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and that's when a lot of this came to light. So you can listen to Cerrone's take on it.
Look, let's be honest. When fighters go on these things, they always act like drama queens. Let's be frank.
And again, you can get Cerrone's take for whatever it happens to be worth.
and they tend to exaggerate as well. And then they'll walk back crap later or whatever.
Yeah, I would be a little surprised if this was completely permanent, but it wouldn't shock me too much either. I mean, that gym has gone, in some respects, downhill, and some of that is... My understanding is that some of it's also Greg Jackson has been doing over the last few years. He started branching out to doing a lot of training and consulting for correction facilities, law enforcement personnel, stuff like that. And when you're the mastermind behind that type of success and you start doing other things, that's the type of thing that happens. And in fairness to Greg, I don't begrudge him that. If those opportunities are better for him financially, if that's what he has a passion for that, and in all seriousness, if anything he does,
what star fighters do they even have there right now? Because John Jones has been like a disaster professionally.
Who's still there right now?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean,
Mike Perry for one.
Perry, Dodson still trains out of there at the moment.
Dodson's not like a bust, but he's very close.
I think Does Arlovsky still train there, or did he leave?
I think
left. Cub Swanson, I think, still trains out of there.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Domestic violence charges were dismissed against Nick Diaz.
Yeah.
He had like an arrest, 2 counts of felony domestic battery by strangulation, misdemeanor domestic battery, and felony battery domestic violence resulting in substantial bodily harm from an incident. A Las Vegas Justice Court judge dismissed the case with prejudice, which means that the charges can't be refiled at a later date. So, this is not, now let me be clear, this is not a dismissal of wrongdoing. It's a dismissal of the charges that were filed against him. But
this is one of those things.
In the eyes of the law, he is innocent, I guess.
Anytime you get charges dismissed with prejudice, that's kind of a big indicator as to the actual strength of and merit of the case, because that doesn't happen to anything with any degree of merit. When you dismiss with prejudice, that means not only are these charges dismissed, these same charges can never be brought again.
Is Diaz...
I don't care what Nick Diaz
do you believe
does.
Diaz is an innocent man?
I mean, of the charges levied against him, I'm prepared to accept the court's findings because I don't want to become overly paranoid about it. I'm not...
But I mean, sometimes a court will dismiss or not pursue charges, not necessarily because, they're not legitimate, but because they don't think they can get them convicted in a trial.
A prosecutor will never advocate for dismissal with prejudice. That's always the judge's decision, not the prosecutor's.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, would I have been surprised if those accusations against Nick Diaz are true? No. Would I be surprised if it turns out that the person who filed them did so, fallaciously? No. No one in the orbit, very few people in the orbit of the Diaz brothers' personal life can be that stable. And if you're going to be around that type of instability, then stuff like this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. All right. Very, very fair, even-handed way to say it. Let's see. 2 more fights were added to UFC 230 in Madison Square Garden. That's the Diaz-Poirier card. So Kurt Halabaugh versus Shane Burgos and Julio Arce versus Shayma Moraes. So we also have David Branch versus Jacare on that card. That's not a bad fight, honestly.
Are they still saying that Romero and Costa's here?
No. As of now, it's not.
Because it's not. I mean, Romero's publicly said he's had eye surgery recently.
That's not a confirmed. That's not a confirmed fight. So
Okay.
I don't think. Who do they want Romero to fight?
Paulo Costa, which in fairness, good fight for both
Good fight.
guys. I
Well,
mean, I don't hate the fight.
is it a light heavyweight or a middleweight?
Middleweight. Costa's a middle. I mean, these are both of these guys are. I'm perpetually amazed either of them makes the weight. I mean, Costa's the proverbial brick shithouse. I mean, you look at that guy and just, jeez. I mean, Costa's supposed to be the next big thing at middleweight. This is a big step up in competition for him against a proven contender and one of the best middleweights in the world. Again, I don't hate the fight, but Romero's mentioned that he's going to be out until early 2019, give or take, to deal with some of the facial injuries he's been dealing with. So I don't know. It's listed as
he has to figure out his weight cut too, because he's embarrassed everyone his last two performances. He's got to figure that out, man. I'm sorry.
No, he does. And whether that means he has to make some significant alterations to make 185 or it means he doesn't fight at middleweight anymore, he needs to figure that out. And quite frankly, he could immediately move up to light heavyweight and be one of the 3 or 4 best guys in that division.
Probably. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but he has to make that decision.
Yeah, it's on him. I mean, but like we joked about it, when Daniel Cormier won the heavyweight belt and it became pretty obvious he's not coming back to light heavyweight. I mean, he was heavier than Stipe for that fight. He's not putting himself through that kind of loss and then weight cut again for 205. It's not happening. I mean, there were some jokes that can we just give the light heavyweight belt to Romero as incentive for him to move up? And I wouldn't have objected to that. Light heavyweight's a dumpster fire anyway. Let me see. We knew about the Mano and Santos fights. They announced, I think they made official over the last couple of weeks, Blades versus Ngannou 2 as the main event for their fight in Beijing, China. I can only imagine there's only 2 reasons to make that fight as your debut in Beijing. You're either playing into cultural stereotypes about Asian people liking monster movies, or you're just trying to kill the interest in the sport. I mean, because that fight, man, that's not going to be a good fight. Did they actually sign Dos Santos and Tuivasa?
I didn't hear about that.
It might just be... Okay, it's expected.
Yeah.
They're expecting Dos Santos and Tuivasa to main event
I don't think the UFC has announced it.
No, they haven't officially signed it, but that's kind of what they want. And
not terrible, but
I like that fight.
How much does Dos Santos realistically have left in the tank?
Not much. Not much.
What about Cain Velasquez? Is his MMA career basically over at this point? Can we write him off? I
don't think we can write him off, but if he doesn't do something in the near future... I mean, his last fight was what? The Brown fight at 200?
In 2016, I think, yeah.
I mean, that's a long time to be off.
I mean, I hope he saved his money well and invested his money well, so... Because I feel like his career is more, I mean, I feel like it's more than dormant at this point because he's just not. And to me, you can't be off for this long and expect to be like a main event guy.
No,
unless you're Conor McGregor, which he's not.
Cain is not Conor McGregor. All right. If that's everything for major news, let's go ahead and do plugs then. So, I know you've been mentioning you have some NDA stuff that's being...
I still can't talk about
Still can't talk about it. Okay.
Might be interviewing CM Punk this week.
All
Possible. Right. We're waiting. I'm waiting on confirmation. It's been offered to me. Everyone seems to be on board, but we'll see. I'm very hopeful. I will be reviewing The Nun this week, so be on the lookout for that. They're calling that the latest installment of the Conjuring universe. So there's a Conjuring cinematic universe now. Go figure.
There is. Well, it starts with the Conjuring, then it has the Conjuring 2, then you have the Annabelle spin-offs, and now you're having these spin-offs.
Now you have a spin-off for The Nun, and I'm sure we'll get spin-offs of whatever.
We'll at least get 2 sequels out of The Nun.
We'll get spin-offs of spin-offs. This one's set in the 1950s, I guess, in Romania. So interesting setting, at least.
I'm so torn on all of those movies. I don't care for the Annabelle movies, but I like The Conjuring. I like the second Conjuring. I'm so torn about how they keep going because they're still pretty good on occasion, but I don't know.
When I get around to it, I plan on reviewing the Blu-ray Deadpool extended cut, and also Solo on a Star Wars Story on Blu-ray. I don't think the Deadpool cut. It's not remarkably different. It's just longer. Some of the edgier stuff, some of maybe the edgier jokes cut out of the movie. Some more very over the top, outrageous, violent. The thing is, the violence in Deadpool 2, it's very cartoony. It's almost it's more cartoony than a Paul Verhoeven movie.
It's up there, certainly.
There's
also not nearly as much of it in Deadpool 2 as there was in 1.
There's a lot they cut out, though. There's a whole attempted suicide montage with Deadpool. To give you an example, he goes to a zoo and jumps into a polar bear exhibit.
Wait, so there's actually a montage. It's not just him blowing himself up. He goes through multiple attempts.
Multiple attempts to commit suicide.
Oh God, I want to see. I hated that movie, but I kind of want to see that.
And those are funny, but they don't it doesn't dramatically change the tone of the movie. And they do kind of flesh out the Russell character a bit more, and but it doesn't remarkably change the overall story of the film. But there was some definite extensions to the action scenes that were probably a little too even for an R-rated film, that's really over the top and outrageous, just too outrageous. Now, to people getting all precious and, saying you can't ever joke about. I'm not saying Disney should not have fired James Gunn, but to me, there's a lot of people saying how can you joke about child rape and pedophilia? It's all over. Is it not all over Deadpool 2? Those type of jokes, right?
It is.
And is it not all over popular shows like Venture Brothers, Family Guy, South Park, and probably many other?
I have not watched any of those shows in at least 5 years, so
okay.
I can't tell you. But I'll take your word. If you tell me they are, I'll take your word for it.
My point is, comedians in popular shows and movies do make those kind of jokes. Let's be honest. But maybe now, if you want to make an argument that it's more understandable to make those type of jokes in a specific setting where you would maybe expect that type of humor, over Twitter, I can maybe accept that argument. But to say that you can never joke about certain subjects, I can't agree with that.
It's just patently untrue. There's all this documented evidence about terrible jokes made by other shows.
When Demi Lovato had an eating disorder, people were really sensitive about joking about eating disorders and bulimia, blah blah blah. And I'm when have comedies that are very edgy ever shied away from joking about eating disorders? They never. I mean, not never, but in the past 10, 20 years, that's never been the case. I'm sorry. So
it is.
They always have. That's just my little soapbox thing there. So yeah. So in conclusion, I'm plugging a future Blu-ray review of the extended cut of Deadpool. Which, if you like Deadpool and those movies, I would give it a look. It's interesting.
Alrighty, I will see you next week.
However, Cable still sucks in the film. I'm sorry. I don't care for Cable in the comics or in the movies.
There's a very significant argument to be made that Cable is just the personification of everything wrong with comics from the 90s.
Yeah, and the movie personifies that as well. The movie character. He's a weak, thin, like he's barely even a character.
Who then breaks what little characterization he has at the end for the sake of saving Deadpool, which just
for no reason.
There was no build up to that moment.
He was moved by Deadpool's sacrifice.
Like, no, you literally went through time to change the future so you could be with your wife and kid again, which is fine. I mean, it's a bit it's it's a standard type of motivation. Fair enough. You don't give that up because this guy who's been an enormous douchebag to you does one good thing. Like, no,
well,
he would have let him die.
He says he decided to do it to protect the future and make sure it doesn't get more messed up. And I'm like, well, if that's the case, what if you your
existence in the timeline in and of itself is now suddenly going to profoundly alter everything going forward.
Since we're talking about this, here's my thing. If you can travel through time and time is not self-fulfilling and you can alter the future, aren't you risking never meeting your wife and causing them to never your family to never happen in the first place?
There's so much, but
if it's so important for you to keep your wife and daughter safe, your presence and your presence in the past can alter the future. Aren't you arguably risking, your wife and daughter's potential existence by staying there?
You are. It was stupid. It was a profoundly stupid end because they didn't want to actually kill Deadpool.
Well, you can't kill Deadpool,
God, I wish you could. I hate that character.
Yeah.
I really do.
I mean, from a financial standpoint, in a franchise standpoint, you can't kill that character.
I'm well aware of the financial realities, and that's fine. But it seems like they wrote that story and got to the end and went, "Oh, we can't actually kill him." Cable does something completely and totally out of character.
I got to be honest. I think having Deadpool stay with Vanessa was stupid because there was nowhere for that relationship to go at all,
except for her death. Which is what they
did.
I
mean, that's my point. And then SJWs got all they fridged the girl character, they fridged the wife. I had no problem with I would have had no problem with Vanessa staying dead because again, there was nowhere for that relationship to go. Because Deadpool is not he's never been one to settle down with one woman. He's had flings and he's had fixation and crushes on various female characters, including Lady Death, but he doesn't settle down and marry or it's dumb, okay? And it wasn't having them get together at the end of the
whole movie's dumb. The whole franchise is dumb.
I'm not gonna say that. I genuinely love the first movie, but I maintain that having Deadpool and Vanessa get together at the end was a big mistake. It was a huge mistake.
All right, I think the whole experiment with Deadpool's a mistake, but they're making money, so what do I know? All right.
Deadpool was not a mistake. We needed that movie at that time.
We did not need it, but a lot of people enjoyed it.
Ragnarok. You hate Thor Ragnarok. You hate everything.
I do not hate everything. I hate Thor Ragnarok. I hate Thor Ragnarok. That's very, very true. I also hate Deadpool, and I hated the sequel.
You secretly hate Infinity War. It's okay to admit. No,
I really liked Infinity War.
You probably hate him. You probably hate the first Avengers movie. You probably hate Civil War. You probably hate Winter Soldier.
Hey, let me think. No, I liked Winter Soldier a lot. Civil War was a touch uneven, but I generally enjoyed.
Okay.
The first Avengers is a terrible movie, but a wonderful thrill ride.
Okay.
No, my only gripe with Infinity...
I bet you like Age of Ultron. And
Age of Ultron?
Yeah.
I mean, it has positives and negatives. I think it suffers from not properly setting up a story for a major for a major conclusion
Want to know
film.
what character I hate? I hate movie Hawkeye with a passion, and what they've done with Hawkeye.
That's fair. No, like honestly, my only gripe with Infinity War was I wanted Thanos to kill more people.
Um,
That's my biggest gripe with that movie. I wanted him to kill more people before the end.
I wanted him to worship death, but that's just my opinion.
I can see how they could have made that work, but it's also a weird concept to execute visually. Anyway, before we go on forever about this, if that's all of your plugs...
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Jeff. We will be
back
back
next week to recap Tyron Woodley's title victory. Hooray.
And I believe we will be previewing their Russian debut. We will. Next week we will review UFC 228 and preview Fight Night 136, which is, again, the UFC's debut in Russia. It'll be at some terrible hour of the morning on Fight Pass, and I will cover it because that's what I do. As for myself, taking a break from a lot of other stuff, actually. No big movie reviews, no big TV parties, stuff like that, but please tune in next week. I thank you all for your continued support. I hope one day to actually deserve it. You can follow the Radlich Broadcasting Network on Facebook. You can also follow, I think Mark's the best place to get updates, so follow Mark Radlich on Twitter. If you want to get updates on the overall Radlich Broadcasting Network, I'll be back next week. Until then, thank you all again for listening. Stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.